Hi there everybody, how we doing? Welcome on in. This video does not have any gameplay to go with it, as I have not actually built this character, and for that I do apologize. But I wanted to bring you this potential build as a league starter for next league, and also I've already told you a lie. I did build the character, I just only got it through the story as a test run, and then deleted it, and I don't have the footage. So, I won't have gameplay because I don't have the foresight to have had gameplay for this. But I will be doing another test run of this sometime in the next few days leading up to the league start. So if you want to catch that, I guess just watch the stream. I promise this wasn't all a ploy to get you to go in the description and click that go to the stream button. But if you want to do that, feel free. This is a Selfcast corpse skill Necromancer. Volatile Dead is what I've gone for. Could very easily be used with Detonate Dead, and also uses Cremation as well for extra single target. This is meant to be a league start variant of the build. This is going to have some fairly budget gear. I do purposefully path past this 3-point jewel socket here. I have another version of the tree that goes past a different 3-point jewel socket, so you can drop some points off this tree. Some of the more cuttable things, 2 points into Firewalker, for instance. Maybe some of the just going over to the shadow area entirely, because this I'm not entirely convinced of. These 3 points down here, you can drop some of those extraneous bits, the cast speed for mental rapidity, and throw them into a cluster jewel if you get a decent one. So it's certainly planned to be usable and good with a cluster jewel, depending on whether or not you can get your hands on one. But I've also planned out a tree to actually level 93 without a cluster jewel, in case you can't find one that's good for it, or you're in solo self-found, or you don't have the budget, or just for some reason or another you don't want to use a cluster jewel. But yes, so I'll walk you through how this works entirely, and let's start with itemization. As far as core itemization goes, there isn't really core itemization. This build is very solo self-found friendly and does not have anything in terms of items that makes it function. A lot of the functionality just comes purely from passive tree and quite a bit from ascendancy, Necromancer being the ascendancy of choice and being very, very powerful for this skill. And you may say, Octavian, Necromancer, what are you doing? Don't you know that's going to be nuked from orbit next league? This is not using really almost any of the minion stuff. The only thing in here that I could see being nerfed is Mistress of Sacrifice. Perhaps the effect of offerings will be nerfed on you, or maybe they'll remove the skill effect duration. I don't know. This is all speculation. But Mistress of Sacrifice may see some nerfs. I sincerely doubt the corpse and mind over matter related areas of Necromancer are the things that will get the nerf, if Necromancer does in fact get some nerfs, which seems fairly likely. I think it's the minion stuff that's more problematic in their eyes and is more likely to see said nerfs. So I think Corpse Pact and Essence Glutton and all that, pretty damn safe as a choice. But yes, back to itemization. We have a Mark of Submission in here just as a very early Curse on Hit stand-in. You would eventually want to go for a Curse on Hit Flammability Ring, because that has stats, and this does not have stats. But this can be gotten very early in the leveling process if you'd like, though probably just rare rings will suit you better then, and also is a super cheap way of getting some flammability on hit into the build, and doesn't really hurt it that much. We still have 5.3k life or so, and 2.2k unreserved mana with Mind Over Matter, so a good EHP pool, even giving up stats on the ring slot. So I think a Mark of Submission is a pretty cheap early means of getting some extra damage in the build. Just throw flammability in there. As far as weapons go, not weaponization. As far as weapons go, Searing Touch is a great early staff, but really only just kind of barely beats a rare staff that's had a Shrieking Essence of Shrieking Essence of Woe and a crafted mod applied to it. So if you can get a Searing Touch and have it be 5-linked, sure. But honestly, you can just go for the 5-link div card set for staves, which is incredibly cheap. Flora's Gift is the div card set you're looking for. Throw a Shrieking Essence of Woe at it, get a decent spell damage roll, and have an open affix to craft Flat Fire Dispels. I put on mana as well. It's not too unlikely for that to happen. Basically, 2 property weapon plus a crafted mod is pretty easy to do. You'd really like to have a Maelstrom Staff for the extra block implicit, but any staff base will do just fine. You can even keep an eye out for Dark Mage div cards, which will give you a 6-link instead of a 5-link, and obviously that is better. More links, more damage. Murder of Innocence is your endgame staff if you want to stay with staffs. This build's rather flexible. You can definitely go one-hand and shield. I don't have much of a better justification for going staves than I want to play with some of the new staff wheels that have been added a number of leagues ago, and I want to see maybe there's some staff stuff coming up. I kind of doubt it, but maybe. I wanted to use staves, basically, and the build is super flexible and can use staves if you want to. Martyr of Innocence allows you to almost reach block cap, by the way, with Bone Offering up, because it has that extra block chance, as well as giving you some extra pen. It's a very powerful weapon. It's what you'd want in the endgame if you're going for staffs, but you can, of course, just use the Essence crafted one. For the body armor, this is also another super flexible slot. You're going to hear me say that a lot for this build. Cloak of Defiance will give you some more mind over matter effectiveness, which will help you make use of that massive mana pool all the more effectively. Duressa's Defiance is great for Onslaught to give you even faster mapping. You get tons of cast speed if you go this route. Belly of the Beast gives you life and is good. Carcass Check makes your AoE bigger, though I found with Volatile Dead that doesn't really feel all that impactful. And I ended up opting for a Hunter Chest with increased effective offerings to get even more block out of the Bone Offering, whether that's up, and then life and crafted percent life. This shouldn't be too hard to get within, say, the first week of the league or so. It's just another 2-property item with a crafted mod. 2-property item with a crafted mod. Generally, when I'm looking for budget gear, unless one of the properties on a rare is incredibly rare, which effective offerings is not common, but it's not insane, 2-prop plus a crafted mod is pretty realistic. We have some Temple Gloves that I just copy-pasted from a character that I already had going in the league. These are flat fire against burning enemies. Since you also chill all enemies near corpses, you could use percent damage against chilled enemies. This is a bit better damage, but either one of which you can get your hands on is a pretty good option. Boots with 2 properties, life and movement speed, and then a flat fire if you've killed recently, which I don't think is even active, because I'm looking at single target. So yeah, I have not checked this box, but it's a nice little bit of damage whenever it's up. We have an amulet with 2 properties and a crafted mod, percent damage, life, crafted mana. And then Divine Judgment is allocated because Divine Judgment is rather cheap. Black, teal, and sepia is not too hard to get. Ring with 1 property, belt with 1 property, 2-prop jewel. So very, very basic gear. You can probably even do better than this early on in the league. You can maybe get a belt with percent LE damage, or a ring with percent fire or something. And then as far as the other gear slots go, a Rumi's Concoction will allow you to hit attack block cap and get pretty darn close to spell block cap without even having the Martyr of Innocence, and so if you can find one for cheap early on is absolutely great. A couple of 2-prop jewels with just generic percent damage and life, and an Intuitive Leap. This is around 20 to 30 chaos towards the start of the league, so it is a bit pricier than a lot of the other things on here, but is also quite nice, giving you access to more life and mana, and then charge gen while clearing. Which otherwise I'd need to run Blood Rage for charge gen while clearing, for frenzies at least, and I don't like running Blood Rage on builds that don't have crazy good life regen, or leech or something along those lines. So instead I've opted for the Intuitive Leap. I think I'll have an easy enough time getting it, but if a lot of people decide they want it in their builds early, it is a rare enough item that it could jump up in price. But it is, as I said, not core. Nothing in this build is really core. So it's just a nice little extra bit if you have the currency early on to grab. I'll go through briefly a few of the early trees. You want to rush for Ellie Overload early on, and then make sure you make a beeline over to Spiritual Aid as you get these nodes in the Ascendancy, as you'll get quite a bit of damage just from the small nodes here. And prioritize some early cast speed. So Firewalker is quite nice, getting over to Light of Divinity for some cast speed, getting Arcane Surge Effect for some cast speed. In fact, you probably even want to pick up Mental Rapidity pretty early. Maybe grab that before this. It will leave you a little bit lower on life, but you should be fine, particularly if in softcore. I think that might be a better swap, but either one of these should work just fine. Just get Ellie Overload as soon as possible, and then get over to this area of the tree for the Arcane Surge Effect and Spiritual Aid. Moving on to Acts 6 to 8, you're going to rewire this a little bit, so you're going to need to respec a couple points, but that's not too bad. You'll get some AoE and some more life and some more mana stuff, possibly even dropping 2 points into Arcane Will if you feel like you want the mana recovery. This is very useful early on for some nice mana regen. I didn't quite think it worth the 2 points in the endgame, but very, very useful while leveling, so 2 points in there won't go amiss if you feel like you need the mana recovery while leveling. And then once you're finished with the story, this is what your tree ought to look like. You're going to want to have repathed again, so you're going to use another couple regrets here so you can get across that way. You'll get these respec points while leveling rather easily, and then you'll start the pathing towards the end of the story over the shadow area, which, like I said earlier, I'm still not 100% convinced by, and if there's really good cluster jewels, this is what gets cut first for those cluster jewels. You'll also have gotten Spiritual Aid by now, so you'll be able to repath through these instead of these nodes. Again, the AoE investment didn't feel all of that relevant with the Volatile Dead. With Detonate Dead, AoE investment probably makes much more of a difference. You're not going to have the tracking nature of your damage. And then this is the Endgame Tree. You pick up a bit more cast speed and regen here. You repath out of the Witch nodes because you no longer need this cast speed as much. You can pick it up somewhere else, and you do all the shadow stuff, and you fill out all the life nodes and stuff over here. There is one other version of the Endgame Tree that I may end up using. If we swap over to this, you can see we cut out the shadow area that I was not super convinced by. This does use a very large thread of hope. There's quite a bit of pathing going on here, and I'm not 100% sold on it yet, but it changes where our 3-point jewel socket is, so we save some of those points here, which means we do drop a curse, but the second curse wasn't getting that much use for us anyways. And we're able to pick up a good amount of life here, and more importantly, stun immunity, as well as endurance charge gen and some Warcry synergy to run a Rallying Cry with, Rallying Cry being quite good in this build, if you don't mind pressing the extra button now and again. This is also slightly lower level as well, so it's easier to fit in a good cluster jewel if you get one, and really the existence of a good cluster jewel is what would make or break me swapping to this, because if I can throw in a couple good damage wheels right here, I'm going to feel a lot better about doing this tree. As you can see, it is somewhat lower on damage than our previous tree was, but that's something I could make up theoretically with the right cluster jewel. This is all going to be included in the path of building that will be in the description below the video. I just want to briefly give you an idea of the strengths and weaknesses of this build from an overview point. This is extremely cheap to get going. There are rare options for every single gear slot, and there's no uniques, like I said earlier, that are core or mandatory, just a lot of ones that are strong. So therefore the build is very solo self-found friendly, and if you're going that route and you want a league start from me, this is the one I would recommend. Pardon. It's very flexible as well in terms of being moved around to a lot of different other ways of using it, if that makes sense. So you could very easily spell sling with this. You just want more life investment and maybe not go mind over matter because you're going to be reserving a lot more mana. That might change your ascendancy choice as well. No, I don't want to change to Templar. I don't know why it asked me that. You might go for Commander of Darkness instead of Essence Glutton if you do that, because now you're not mind over matter, or you're just not as mana invested. Among other things. It could be worked into a Poet's Pen as well, or you could cast while channel with it. There's a whole bunch of different things that are all certainly possible with this as your starting point. Because Selfcast is the easiest to get off the ground. It requires the absolute least. It requires nothing, basically. So you can start from this framework and then go to one of the other variants of a Volatile Dead Necromancer that you might want to go to. As well as that, in terms of strengths, the build is very tanky, or on paper it should be. It's got deceptively good EHP with the mind over matter between the 5.3, 5.4k life, and that's with things like the Mark of Submission and not perfect life rolls and such. You can certainly push it further. And then 2.2 to 2.3k unreserved mana. If you don't want the Herald of Ash, you could even go up to 3k mana or so. It's a pretty good amount of EHP. And then you get straight damage reduction from the Ascendancy, lowering nearby enemies' damage. You get almost capped to capped block, depending on the quality of your gear. You get Fortify if you want to Leap Slam or Shield Charge, if you want to go one-handed shield instead of staff. That's pretty easy to fit in. You could do Curse on Hit and Feeble with your second curse, rather than the Ellie weakness that I have for single target right now. There's a lot of ways that you can take this and make it quite tanky. You could even, if you wanted to use Flame Dash instead of Leap Slam, you could use the Vigilant Strike Jewel, because you are still holding a melee weapon, and that would give you Fortify rather easily. So, weaknesses though, this is a many button build. 2 buttons at least to get your damage out there with the Corpse Placement and the Volatile Dead, though your cast speed is very high, so it still feels quite smooth to play, I can attest to that. But it is, in that regard, sort of similar to Traps or Mines and Totems, which a lot of people don't enjoy. And as well as that, this variant of the build is relatively capped in terms of its DPS ceiling. You can get somewhere between 1 to 1.6 million DPS pretty effectively and comfortably with minimal investment on a build like this, but it's not going to push that much further than that. So you're not going to be getting like 10 million DPS or some crap like that, like you might with Pyroclast Mines or Explosive Trap or Blade Flurry. You can push it. And that is enough, though. Like, keep in mind, like, that's enough to bring down Cyrus 8, that's enough to bring down Shaper and Uber Elder, particularly given how tanky and reliable it is. But it's not going to be like one-shotting Guardians or something at any point. So if you want to build with a super high ceiling to invest into, this may not be the correct choice for you. And it can be reoriented to be much higher in terms of ceiling by starting with this as your platform for league starting, and then going the Cast While Channeling or Cast on Crit or Poet's Pen variant, as those all have a much higher ceiling than Selfcast and can push a lot further. So if you want that ceiling, you'll just need to rewire some of the fundamentals once you get to the end game and get a budget underneath you, and reorient the build a bit. But it is a great way to start out a VD build if that's the kind of ceiling you want to reach. I can still actually recommend it, just with a caveat. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed the video. I will leave a link in the description to the path building for this, and it's going to have all of those different trees that I showed, as well as some stuff in the notes. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask in the description below. Or sorry, in the comments below. Don't ask in the description. That's mine. I get to type there. Thank you all for watching. I'll see you in the next one.